Hi, I'm David Jacks, and today I'm living a healed life. I'm free to be my 100% authentic self. You may say I'm living the dream. I used to think that expression was funny until it became true for me. And for me, living the dream means living in alignment with one's purpose. And it's really a great place to be. And it took me a long time to get here, and there were certainly a lot of trials and tribulations along the way. When I was 4 years old, that's when things happened. That's when I got separated from God. When I was 4 years old, we had family over for a holiday, and it was Yom Kippur, it's one of the most religious days of the year for Jews, and all my family, all the elders, they were talking about the Jews versus every other ethnic group and how we all stacked up against one another. And I asked a question and I got kicked out of the kitchen. And then when I'm in the living room, shortly after that, my parents had a fight. My mom had just gotten out of the hospital with phlebitis, and she was not up to having people over. My father had people over anyway. Then they got into a fight. He threw a tantrum. She's hobbling because phlebitis affects her leg. She's hobbling and crying, running into her room. And I'll never forget that, because that was the first time I remember my dad throwing a tantrum. And when my dad yelled, it was so loud, the house would shake. But this particular time, I froze stiff when he started screaming. And then I said in my head, oh my God, that's my only protector. And she just ran down the hall, crying to hide in her room. How could you do this to me? How can you leave me with just her? And I felt a surge of energy come back to me. And if I had to translate it into words, it said, you got me. And I never forgot that. And through the years, from time to time, we would talk. And I'd always tell him the same thing. God, if you heal me, I'll heal others. I promise. That's all I want. If you could just heal me, I'll heal others. One of the core feelings that's associated with mental health, or mental illness rather, is this whole feeling of other. Then in nursery school, first back to school night ever, the teacher tells my mom, I love David, we all love David. That's part of the problem. He's got a lot of friends and he's like the ringleader, and he's not really interested in nap time. But there are other kids in the class who aren't his friends and they want to take a nap. So my mom talked to me about it. I said okay, and that was the end of it. Then came first grade. In first grade, I got put in a slow reading group, and that really broke my heart. I was ashamed about that. And I don't remember discussing it too much with my parents. I kind of remember my dad just kind of hearing about it and grunting, and my mom being kind and nurturing about it, as she always was. But it was in the second grade when I came home. Unbeknownst to me, report cards came that day, and my father opens the door, which is weird because I normally didn't see him until like 6 o'clock because he was working. So I was excited that my dad greeted us, and then he just started laying into me, screaming and throwing a tantrum. What is this? How can you do this? What's wrong with you? It's not like you're your sister. I ask her for A's. I only ask you for B's, and you can't even do that. And I ran down the hall crying and hid in my room for a while. And from that day on, to be honest, I never liked my dad. You know, and I had these things again. And it was another thing that made me feel other. When I was in school, my friends, you know, they would all talk about their dads and how their dads were their hero. And I never knew what to say because I didn't even like my dad, and he didn't even like me. I was scared of him. He definitely wasn't my hero, and that was a bad feeling for me. You know, that was one of these other feelings, that and reading slower than the other kids. You know. Then at 10 or 11, after the second grade incident, so I'm 7 years old, my father throws that fit. And then after that, I keep telling him how hard school is for me, and I'm trying my hardest, and I get met with a lot of, well, try harder, that's not good enough, you're unacceptable. Those are some of his favorite things to say. And I just kept saying, I'm trying my hardest, I'm trying my hardest. And eventually, I got taken to see a doctor to get evaluated for ADD. And he was a kind, endearing man. And he gave me every opportunity to prove that I was smart and said I didn't have ADD. Now understanding more about ADD, it was a horrible assessment. I thought the ink blot was fascinating. By that time, I'm already interested in psychology because I know I'm different than the other kids. And the ink blot and the different butterflies, you know, I thought it was really interesting. For those of you that don't know the ink blot, every picture looks like a butterfly, pretty much. Anyway, I thought that was fascinating. And then there was this other task that he had me do. It was on a archaic computer, and it was like video game like. It reminded me of Centipede on Atari. It was fun. And if you give somebody with ADD something to do that's fun and interesting, they're going to show you that they're as smart as anybody else. Anyhow, that's what happened. I get evaluated for ADD. They say I don't have it, which in turn reinforced my dad's opinion that I had a character issue, and it was an effort issue, right? And so he kind of doubled down with try harder, that's not good enough, you're unacceptable. He's like a 2-year-old. He would tell my mom in front of me. He'd love to ask me, what are you, an idiot? I don't know how many times he asked me that. And I remember just, you know, I remember crying and begging my mom to divorce him. I don't know how many times I asked God to separate us. And I would always put in there, you don't have to kill him. I just want to be separated from him. You don't need to hurt the guy. I just want out. And then when I was 15, my dad got cancer. And I felt guilty. I had been, for some time, asking God to remove him from my life. And I thought my dreams or my wishes were granted. And the other thing was, love him, hate him, fear him, whatever. He was the God of the house and the God of my life. And God was going to die. But he made it. He made it. Just like his dad. You know, it's always a cyclical thing, right? My dad would say about his dad that he was too mean to die. So I guess it runs in the family. So my dad beats cancer, but nonetheless, around this age of 15, that news and like the fear of his death and how that affected me, my biggest symptom that I ever had in my life as it relates to mental health was insomnia. And from 15 to 18, that's when this symptom, this insomnia, the inability to fall asleep or stay asleep was just getting worse and worse. And finally, when I was 18, my parents agreed to take me to a psychiatrist. And I was excited. I felt like I was getting my day in court, to be honest. I was really excited that I was going to be seen, heard, and understood for the first time. But that's not what happened. Talked to my parents first, calls me in the office 15 or 20 minutes later, sits me down, and he says, I want you to know you have depression. It's not your fault. Your grandmother had it, and she killed herself, and it's hereditary. But don't worry. I'm going to give you this medication, and it's just like having diabetes, and this is your insulin. You just take this pill every day the rest of your life, and you'll be fine. And I got put on Paxil. And I couldn't believe it. Because as difficult as sleep was, Paxil made it worse. Sleep was already impossible, both falling asleep and staying asleep. I remember I would be laying in my bed, and just at that moment when you're just about to fall asleep, I would pop up. And the reason that happens, when you have the pop-up kind of wake up, that's your nervous system. That's your nervous system wanting to protect you from an imminent attack or threat. And when you're growing up in an abusive household, it's very hard to relax enough to be able to sleep. That's why my insomnia just kept getting worse and worse. Because the older I got, the more important grades got and the more pressure that was put upon me. I wanted to get as far away from home as possible, go someplace sunny. So after my senior year, I go to Arizona State University, and I moved to Arizona. And I had a great time at ASU. Although I drank and I smoked weed way too much. And there's a couple things there, right? There's finally getting out of having super strict parents and getting some freedom. That's certainly part of it. But to be honest, that Paxil, it numbed me. And it made me feel like there was this wall kind of between me and other people. And the only thing that I could do to get that wall to come down was drink or smoke weed. And so I did that a lot. You know, maybe I should just stop taking the medication, but I was afraid of getting diabetes. So instead I just got drunk and high. And that was my lifestyle for a while. And then I'm about 28 years old, and I realized that I'm still living the same lifestyle that I was when I was in college. And so I moved to New York City to grow up. I knew I was immature. And I knew I wasn't going to grow up continuing to drink and smoke weed with my college friends. So, about 28 years old, I moved to New York City. And that's when I start like my spiritual pursuits. That's when I'm starting to meditate and listening to Abraham Hicks, The Law of Attraction, and starting to think about what I want to do with my life. And I find me a doctor in New York City, and I say, Doc, just make me sleep. I don't care what you do, I gotta sleep. And he was a psychopharmacologist. And he was upfront with me. He told me, I'm essentially a researcher of medication and I do research and studies of medications. I'm not a typical psychiatrist, I'm a researcher. I said, yeah, all right, cool. I just want to sleep. I don't care. Just put me to sleep. And he was like, all right, I want to put you to sleep. And I ended up being prescribed Klonopin, Ativan, Halcyon, and Lunesta. So those are 3 benzos, and Lunesta is like a baby benzo. But I didn't really ask any questions. I was just really glad to be sleeping. And it gave me an opportunity, created some stability. And with that, it made me think about helping others, right? Because that's all I ever wanted to do. And so I discovered coaching and enrolled at IPEC Coaching School, which is a spiritually based coaching program. And it's based on the 7 levels of energy. It's created by Bruce D. Schneider. And I really enjoyed learning, the learning part, and then also the personal development that I gained from coaching others and being coached. It was a really great experience. It was about a year-long program, and I really got a lot out of it. And this core energy coaching is about raising your level of consciousness. And as a result, I really made a lot of ground in overcoming my depression. I really felt a lot better. I really worked towards forgiving my father, and I wanted to share my greatest stories, and I put them all together in a coaching program called Your Upward Spiral. But I didn't know how to market it, because you weren't allowed to call yourself a mental health coach because there was no such thing back then. And this is like 2010, 2011, and they said, well, don't use the word energy because you'll freak people out. Now it's everywhere. But so I didn't know what to call myself or what to call the program. So I billed it as a energetic makeover. But anyway, I'm coaching, I'm training, and I'm starting to feel like what kind of coach, what kind of trainer takes narcotics. Because benzos, what I had been prescribed, Klonopin, Halcion, Ativan, those are narcotic medications. And so I had to get off them. And I got off of the Halcion and the Ativan pretty good, and we saved Klonopin for last. And it was quite the worthy opponent. The withdrawal from Klonopin was really, really hard. It was really hard. Sleep became impossible. I'm having mental confusion and memory issues. I gained a bunch of weight. I'm just not the same guy. And while this is going on, so there's a Hurricane Sandy, and then me trying to quit the medication, I'm in withdrawal. And then on top of it, my girlfriend tells me she's getting deported. And I didn't believe her. She's from France, and she teaches French literature. She has a couple master's degrees from America. She's the sweetest woman in the world. I believed her that she was facing deportation, but I just figured there's no way that her employer would let that actually happen. And so I didn't take it all that seriously. And then when it got time to actually happen, as it got closer and closer, I was really upset. I thought it was incredibly unjust. Her and I, we had our ups and downs like any other couple, but I wanted to marry her. I wasn't sure whether or not it would be lifelong, but we would figure that out. And I really thought that I thought her being deported was unjust. But I was scared. And I went to my sister and asked my sister for advice. That's an advice. It's funny, my sister's name is Erica, but Erica Jong has this quote that advice is something that you ask for when you already know the answer, but you wish you didn't. I already knew that I wanted to marry Anna and keep her here, but I was scared, so I asked my sister, oh my God, you can't do that. Can't do that. And she had her reasons that I won't get into because she'd get mad at me. But anyhow, that's what happened. Then, so after rehab, I thought I was going to be ready to take on the world, and it wasn't really quite like that. So for a couple years, I worked part-time as a vitamin clerk. And so I ran into an old friend from college who was doing real estate, and he said, come work for me. And so I did. And so we would buy foreclosures and then sell them to flippers. And so I got pretty good at it, the real estate thing. I made a lot of money in 2019. And also, by the end of 2019, I'd become a lot more efficient. And I figured I could work probably about 30% less and make just as much money. So COVID hits, and I had already been planning to work on my health anyway, so I don't really think much of it. And around this time, I'm befriending my best friend's wife. She happens to be a therapist, and so we get on pretty well. And I just remember her telling me, Dave, the type of insomnia that you have, where sleep is just impossible, that is trauma. That is not depression. And then she told me about this guy, Dr. Amen, and how Dr. Amen uses pictures of the brain to make more accurate diagnosis, and how he also discovered 7 different types of ADD. And when I heard this about this guy, Dr. Amen, right away, I was making an appointment, and I went to LA and I got pictures of my brain done. And it turns out, guess who has ADD? And more than one kind, right? And it wasn't just that. I also had a traumatic brain injury to my left temporal lobe, and that manifests much like trauma. And I had depression. And so I went to check that out, and I started getting treatments there, and they were really helpful. And so the only thing was that some of the medications I was on were contraindicated. So I'm getting these treatments, and at the same time, I am reducing my medication, but I'm feeling good. I'm enjoying it, and I'm doing great. And then one morning it happened. The experience, right? What I assume Jimmy was talking about when he says the experience, or what Morrison meant when he said break on through to the other side. But whatever, I had the experience. I woke up and I was kicking and screaming and crying and laughing and every human emotion at one time. Completely unbelievable. And then I look to the window, and it's the biggest sun I ever saw in my life. And there was just so much energy coming out of it. It represented God to me and all his power and all his glory. And then there was this beautiful field, this green field of hills and this huge body of water. And it had this amazingly nurturing and loving energy to it. It was Mother Nature. And then there was a third essence or energy. There was no visual. But I swear, I could hear the wind whisper, forgiveness, forgiveness, forgiveness. So after having the experience, I'm hyper aware of everything. And while we've made a lot of progress on my trauma, there is still some unresolved issues. So there's this billboard in Phoenix with a red background. It's got a picture of Trump in the middle and that emoji style with his head like exploding. And on either side of him, there are dollar signs in the shape of swastikas. And I drove by it once, twice. Never mind, my lady. I drive by it 4 or 5 times and I freak out. I have a psychotic episode. I get triggered. So after a short stint at the hospital, I come home and I got work to do. I know I'm on my way. And I'm working with Dr. Amen in his clinic, and I know I'm gonna heal. So I sign up for his program to become a certified brain health coach. And I already know we're gonna finish the job. And I know that I'm on my way to living my healed life, living my dream, right? I just had to see it through. I just had to go through the process. And it took me a while, but I really started to come together and become the man I wanted to be. And I was ready to relaunch my coaching practice. And then my dad died. And you know, one of his favorite lines was, "When are you gonna wake up and die right?" He used to tell me. You know, when my dad died, that was a trip. I don't know what the normal reaction is to a parent dying, you know. But I was upset for 2 or 3 days. Mainly because, well, I didn't expect him to make it. But then he had a great day. And so then there was optimism. And I had a great day. And they sent my mother home from the hospital at 8 p.m. 3 a.m. she gets a phone call. He didn't make it. And so my dad died. And, I was upset for a few days. And then I had this experience that the only thing I could relate it to is when people in recovery, when addicts or alcoholics are in recovery and they first get sober, they call it a pink cloud. A pink cloud is just where you're just floating happily along. And so I was kind of riding this pink cloud. I was upset for a few days, but then for about 2 weeks, I was on cloud 9. I felt a little weird, right? Because I knew my dad just died, but I couldn't help it and I could not hide it. I was on cloud 9. I was happy and free. I felt like Atlas and somebody took the world off my shoulders. And then after this 2-week period, then I started having mental and emotional flashbacks. I started remembering things that happened. And I started processing my father, my relationship with him, and it was just like going through trauma therapy all over again. And it was a really rough 6 months. And then I'm getting tired of it, and I think I'm almost done processing him and our relationship and weeding through his anger. And I went out to a park and I meditated and did my best to connect to God. And I just kind of did this thing with my hands where I was like separating, visualizing, separating my Father's soul from mine, kind of thing. And it worked. And so, here we are. Here I am, wide awake in America, ready to live my life purpose, ready to help others, right? Living a dream. I'm living my dream, and I want you to live your dream. Anyone could heal. And on my website right now, I created a download. It's called 5 Pillars, the 5 Pillars of Healing, about the 5 Pillars of Healing from trauma, mental illness. And you can go there, DaveJax.com, and you can do that. And from there, we can have a conversation if you like. Or you can just go there and request a consultation and we'll talk. But with the 5 pillars, there's this readiness assessment that I made up, and it's pretty cool. But I gotta tell you, there's really only 2 things that you need. If you want to heal, there's only 2 things. Faith and courage. That's it. If you want to heal, that's what you need. If you want to heal from your trauma, heal from your mental illness, your addiction, whatever it might be, you're going to need faith and courage. I want you to be brave. So, if you're not living as you, or how you dreamed and how you visualize yourself being, and you know you're greater than what you're currently living, I want to hear from you. I want to help you, and if I can't help you, then by God, I will get you to somebody who can. So, be my guest. Check out the 5 Pillars of Healing and the Readiness to Heal assessment. Sign up for a consultation. I can tell you, I have a ton of experience with my own self and others in the areas of trauma, mood disorders, ADD, anxiety is a given, insomnia, substance abuse. You can heal from it all. You got to know what's going on with you. You got to know what's wrong. You got to know where you're at. And that's it. Between now and the time I die, that's all I want to do, is make good on my promise to God and bring you into connection with the peace of God that's within you. When that happens, then you're home, then you're your authentic self. And then you get to be the love-based being that you're meant to be. You're worthy. You are loved, and you are loved.